You are listening to SPN, the Sports Podcasting Network.
Terminó Axel Schwarzenegger.
Va a pegarle Ronaldinho Gaucho. Ya lo hace. Pierna derecha, directo al arco. ¡Golazo! 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 ¡Golazo!
This is Soccer Today, live on SPN Radio, your new live show about the beautiful game in all its glory, with Duane, Rollins and Kevin Laramee. MLS, EPL, La Liga, Champions League, all is fair game. Powered by the Sports Podcasting Network. Visit us at sportspodcastingnetwork.com.
I'm alive, Kevin.
Are barely, but you are, and you found back your voice as well.
Yeah, it's a little bit better today, and that's a good thing. Actually, it's a lot bit better today, and that is a very good thing because it was getting a little annoying. I had a power outage yesterday, which is why I was AWOL, and I felt bad about that. Kevin was desperately trying to get a hold of me. I think the RCMP were called, which is funny because there isn't even really, but nonetheless, all is settled now. Kevin, how are you doing over there?
I'm doing pretty good, Duane. I'm really proud of the Calumet interview that I did yesterday. So if you have missed that interview, go to yesterday's show. Listen to Calumet talk about the Canadian men's national team, his experiences with the Deltas in the last week. His thought on his beginning of his career was given a fair chance, and I love his answer to that. So listen to Calumet on yesterday's show.
Yeah, it's always the question with those young academy kids is whether they're given a fair chance. And we're going to talk a little bit in our Bits and Bytes section about the possibility of more of them getting a chance and whether we think that's a good idea with some news that Jonathan Tannenwald dropped on Twitter today. Before that, I wanted to touch on some incidents happening in Europe. And this was last week that the main thing happened during a game between Leipzig and Dortmund. Most of you listening or some of you listening may be familiar with the generalities of this, but basically there was a clash outside the stadium between certain fans of Dortmund and the Leipzig visiting fans as they came in. There were rocks thrown by the Dortmund fans. There were really crude banners all over the stadium. They were all sort of to do with the banners anyway, were to do with the style, the type of team that Leipzig is. And we've talked about this before. And it's basically because it's corporate owned and it was an entity that was sort of created rather than organically built. And this has some people in Germany upset. They feel that this is not proper, that this is not what a real football club is, that it isn't organic, and so on and so forth. Now,
True.
clearly, and I want to, yesterday.
I was just gonna say, he who has never, what's the expression? He who has never did something bad through the first stone, and no stone will be thrown. That's you have to get off your high horse at some point, no?
Well, no, precisely. And there was, and to fair to the Dortmund fans, during their German Cup game yesterday, that many of them held up banners that just sort of said, we're sorry, that apologized to the Leipzig fans that were swept up into this, and the team itself has, of course, condemned. A lot of call for them to be sanctioned for this, and fair enough, because it's pretty clear that the violence was entirely coming from the Dortmund supporters. They get so much attention for the great stuff they do in the stadium in terms of their great tifos and displays and just their incredible support. It's obviously one of the best supported teams in the world. That a few bad apples ruin the batch, right? And that's sort of what's happening here. But sacrimonious is the word that comes to mind here. In fact, if you look at Dortmund's ownership, there's corporate ownership as part of it as well. So there's a little bit of
it's 2017, Duane. Wherever there's money to be made, you'll see corporate entities behind it because it's 2017, and it's not true that a mom and pop club will have stayed a mom and pop club to the expansion and the influx of money of Champions League, of revenue, of TV and all that. Everything has become a corporation in the world of sports in the last 30 years. And if you believe otherwise, it depends on the level, of course. USL team, yeah, it's pretty much closer to what used to be against modern football. But that attitude, when it comes to the bigger club like Borussia Dortmund, you have to take yourself a good hard look in the mirror before you throw that stone.
Dortmund is a big club, and this idea that they're trying to protect all the sanctity of small and organic clubs around the world is a bit much from an outside perspective, right? Like there was that survey in Germany that showed like 80% of the fans in Germany supported either Munich or Dortmund. So it's not exactly like this team's hurting. You look at a city like Leipzig, which is in Eastern Europe. That is an area. If you look at what happened to football in the East after the fall of the wall, which is more than 20 years ago now, more than 25 years ago now. So it's been quite a while that it really just dried up. That most of the power in the Bundesliga is in Western Germany. So that this company comes in and they provide the city, which has lacked top flight football, a big city, a city with a great deal of history, not all the good, but a great deal of history in Leipzig, that they give them this opportunity, these fans this opportunity to have this club to support at the top level again. And that's, who these fans are. These are people that just want to watch Bundesliga football in their hometown. They want to have a team to support again. And they've made their own choice. And that's ultimately, I guess, where, we're probably coming at this from the North American perspective, but it's ultimately where you come down on this is, who are they to judge who someone chooses to support? Yeah, I would be uncomfortable if TFC were purchased by, I don't know, Monster energy drinks and become Toronto Monsters or something like that.
Here, let's
that
go
would
with
make me uncomfortable, but ultimately it would.
Let's go to more realistic company.
Yes.
Coca-Cola, Duane, just buys TFC. So they're the Reds, but they're Coca-Cola in the front and everything is Coca-Cola in the stadium.
There you go. They're just a giant walking Coke, or maybe they'd be Diet Coke because it's an MLS and the real Coke team would be in Europe or something. I don't know. But anyway, that's it would make me uncomfortable. But I would ultimately have to make that decision of whether I stuck with it. And if you look at the Metro Stars to the Red Bulls, there probably are a few fans. And I've talked to some NYCFC fans that claim that they were Red Bulls fans they were Metro Stars fans until the Red Bulls thing came in. I think that's probably a small number, but ultimately that's a choice you make as a fan. And if you're in Dortmund, it's awfully bloody easy for you to judge because you have this that is successful and has all of these advantages already inherent because of its success to, look down your nose at these people that just finally had this team to support, right? And I mean, it goes without saying that throwing rocks at them is ridiculous. And those fans that, want to prove that they're superior by acting like idiots, I don't know what the hell they're thinking there. And as I said, to be fair, the Dortmund fans, other Dortmund fans have spoken up against that. So that's, the sense, like I said, it's a few bad apples. So we won't judge them all, but nonetheless, it is, sacrimonious. It is a bit ridiculous all in all.
Yeah, no. And the one thing that really disparaged me in that aspect of violence in the stadium, it takes the beauty, the magic away for that 8, 9, 10-year-old that's in the stand, that's making his passion for the game grow. That's literally, it's growing inside him, and he's taking it all in. And then that happens, and his father just protects him and whisks him away. It takes that magical moment and that beautiful look, how peaceful it is. It takes that out of the game, and that is unacceptable. We do not want those. The fan base, but the kids' fan base to be alienated, and we don't want the parents to not bring their kids anymore because it's too dangerous. It's the supporters' culture is very important, but you need to build that culture with the kids, and the kids need to be welcome. And whenever there's violence in a stadium, well, somebody please think about the children.
Will someone please think about the children? The Simpsons reference there. I think we could put that one on our bingo list too, a Simpson reference. All right, Kevin, that's with the 5 minutes left in the segment. You mentioned the Ouimet interview from yesterday. I was curious to get your take, not having had the opportunity to talk to you, but after the fact on what is happening in San Francisco, what is happening with Ouimet out there in particular, but what do you think of the Deltas right now, having had an opportunity to speak to one of their players yesterday?
I've asked Carl yesterday, did the USL, NASL Division 2, I was going to say drama. Yeah, it was drama. So let's put it this way. The drama that happened in the offseason concerning the league sanctioning of the NASL, USL, did it bring like an aura on the decision that you wanted to take? And it's like, as soon as I knew that the NASL will be back, I knew San Francisco was the place I wanted to go. Mark Dos Santos, other players that he knows that are playing in San Francisco, makes it an easier or adaptation period for Carl because he does have some familiar faces, some new players as well. But the tactics and the way that Mark Dos Santos does session, which he does mention, is very high tempo. It's made for development. It's made for team bonding, for creating tactics that are essential for resolving for the team. So that the last week, everybody's learning the ground and learning where to train. They're getting accustomed to their new digs, to their new commute, because it's not easy to commute in San Francisco. All those things are getting used to it. But what he liked is the project of Mark Dos Santos, finding Mark Dos Santos again after the attack in the Academy of the Montreal Impact period in the early 2010s. He does have that sense of familiarity. It is like a new beginning for Carl as well because he had a difficult 2 years. We all remember what the incidents in the USL2 in his first game for the Red Bulls 2, where Romeo Parks did the most heinous kick I've ever seen. We didn't even talk about the situation because, well, we all moving on from this and nothing of good could come of it. It's a bad night and a bad injury to remember, but his stint wasn't easy because of only 18 games played with the Red Bulls. He was great with the Red Bulls beginning of the season, but it was mixed with a lot of injuries and they had a bad stint, losing a lot of games, and that made for a bad stigma on him. And eventually, he didn't get the playing time needed, was transferred to loan out to the NASL, to the Armada. This year truly is a new beginning for Carl Ouimet, and he does approach it that way.
Yeah, look, it's a tough position. When you lose it, it's familiarity and sort of feel and your ability to work with your partner back there is such a key component to the position he plays. So once you get knocked out of the lineup, it's awfully hard to get back in sometimes. And, you see that with pretty much any team in the world. So it's not necessarily always a talent issue. Sometimes a fit issue.
Exactly. Not just that, Duane. When we go back to 2012, when Carl Ouimet was signed, the lay of the line of the academy was very different than it is right now. The amount of staff, the amount of levels, it wasn't as complete as it was last year. Now it's missing FC Montreal, but it wasn't as complete as even this year. So you did not have a chance for Carl Ouimet like a Balou Tabla or a David Choignard that I'll talk about later today, Duane, of having that training camp. And he was signed mid-season in 2012 and the team had to fight hard. He got his game-winning goal in 2013, if I remember correctly. His only goal in Major League Soccer is probably the pinnacle of his young career right now, that goal that he scored late, and it was a winner for Montreal. But outside of that, the playing time, the chances, he said he had his fair chance. But it's funny how the magnifying glass on especially the first batch of homegrown that played for Montreal with the coaching staff that were present at that time, it wasn't Biello, it was other coaching staff present at that time. And it seems like one or two mistakes by either Ouimet or go to Tissot, and then they would pay for it for their playing time for weeks on end. And that mentality of having that sort of Damocles right above your head, that if you make one mistake, you'll be benched. You play with such a defensive mentality, or like you are tight. You don't want to make a mistake, so you're overcautious. And that mentality can go a long way. When you feel you are free to perform the way you should and you have confidence on you, there'll be a lot of difference. And I do believe those two young players, they're in training camp for Montreal right now. The two latest homegrown signing for Montreal, David Choignard and Jean-Yves Balou Tabla, they do have that confidence instilled in them because they see Mauro Biello and they know where he's coming from. It wasn't the case back in Carl's days.
Yeah, and look, he's part of a generation of MLS Academy grads that I don't know if they did get a fair shake. And I'm not going to say in his case it's because he's Canadian or whatever. It's because he's young, and MLS coaches, because they're they feel the pressure like any professional manager would, tend to, I think they'll accept a mistake by a veteran because they're confident that veteran will figure it out, that it was a one-off thing. They see a mistake by a kid, especially an academy kid, and I think there is sort of a reluctance amongst American coaches in particular to accept, like, American coaches that came through the system, the Major League Soccer experience coaches that came through the NCAA system. I think there's just a reluctance for them to accept that the academy kids are at the same level as their draft picks. So I think they make a mistake and they pull them right away. It's like, well, you see, we're not ready. They're just not ready yet. And once they get out of the lineup, it's nearly impossible to get back in. And that's confounded by the fact that there's very few secondary competition games for these kids to play in as well. I mean, at best you get 4 Voyageurs Cup games here in Canada. That's not a lot. If you're in the CCL, that's a different gig. But even now, with the format of the CCL, there won't be any games this year, right? Outside of the Vancouver games at the start of the year. So it's just compounded that way, Kevin.
Yeah,
right,
no, exactly.
Take a big break and. All right, we'll take a break and we'll be right back.
You are listening to Soccer Today, live on SPN Radio. Visit sportspodcastingnetwork.com for more.
Hello.
Yep, we are back. When I was just going to talk about David Choignard and Jean-Yves Ballou-Tabla, we mentioned the car we met and was he given a fair chance? And now I think it's the second generation of homegrown player for the Montreal Impact that might be given a fair chance. And one of those reasons, Duane, is Jonathan Tannenwald is reporting right now that we might have a 31 spot roster for this year because of homegrown spots. So what Jonathan Tannenwald is actually reporting is 31 players will be signed by each club for the season, and you have a more homegrown spots, and that will give those homegrown players the chance to be around the team, the chance to practice, the chance to maybe give them a little candy, that carrot at the end of the stick, to give them a little bit more playing time once in a while, and that is very positive. It's not for sure, but Jonathan has very high sources, and Jonathan is very rarely wrong. So I am positive that that's going to happen. And yes, those two players already have MLS contracts. If you talk about the Montreal Impact, David Choignard and Jean-Yves Ballou-Tabla are two young players in the midfield role that wants to come in and shake up things. They want to come in. They want to give a run for their money to the other midfielders. They want to have start. And Jean-Yves Ballou-Tabla, 17 years old, member of Canada U20, he actually scored a goal against England last year in a 2-1 victory of Canada versus England in the U20. Now he wants to score in MLS. He wants to make Mauro Biello happy to choose him. And Ballou-Tabla come in to Major League Soccer, come in with his training camp right now with an attitude, with a certain confidence that we have rarely seen for a 17-year-old. And like I was saying, Duane, it's the second generation of young academy players for the Montreal Impact. They're coming through, and they have that little intangible that was missing. Maybe it's because we're Canadian and we're way too nice and we don't want to brush feathers. This time around, those two Duanes are not afraid to brush feathers.
Yeah, no, there's, I think, a confidence with these guys, just knowing from the time that they were very young, that they had this opportunity that the players before that didn't necessarily feel that they have. The 31 spots, it certainly is a good initiative to try and move forward and give more of these players time, and it's going to give an advantage to teams that prioritize the academies. And we talked about this the other day, that there still is a divide within the league amongst teams that sort of believed in that model and have bought in full out, and some teams that are a little bit slow. They're dragging their feet for whatever reason, but they're getting left behind, and it's just going to really need to be looked at. Look, there's also an inherent advantage towards the major metro cities when you come to these academies, because there's just more players, right? You look at LA, New York. These are teams they're areas that are massive, talent rich, and that is going to give them an advantage. But there are, I don't think that's an excuse for teams that live in smaller areas to not be creative. Look at RSL and what they've done with creating what was the first residency program in Major League Soccer, and that allowed them to sort of close that gap. Obviously, Utah is not going to be a huge draw for them, but if they can go into Arizona, they can go into other areas and bring these kids in. Hell, they had a Canadian there at one point, so they've obviously reached pretty wide. That's something that can benefit them as well. You look at Vancouver. I disagree on a Canadian development standpoint with the amount of area that they've got access to. I think that it's bad for the game in Canada, but it's good for the Whitecaps. So you got to give them credit that way if you want to be Whitecap specific on it, Kevin. So these are all things that I think that are going to continue to grow within Major League Soccer, and I do believe it has to be the next phase of the development of this league.
Hopefully, because we talk a lot about value in a salary cap league, and wait a second, you'll see where I'm going with this. When you talk about value in a 23-man roster, if you have an homegrown in that 23, he takes the spot of somebody else, so he has to bring his value. He has to bring his part of the contribution to the success of the team in that roster spot, because if not, he's taking the space of somebody that can. When you're talking about a 31-man roster with maybe a lot more spot for so 3 more spots, because you have the 11, 18, 23, 28, right? 28 is the amount of maximum players reserved included and all that. So the 3 spots more for homegrowns gives them the chance of not taking the space of somebody, not taking the spot of somebody else. They got their own spot. And how about performing a little bit more freely, because you don't necessarily have that pressure on you of, look, if you're not helping us, you're taking the spot of somebody that can. It gives them a little bit more of maneuver, like a space to maneuver, I think, of being maybe not as harsh on them if they have a little bit more space to be themselves. And when I say be themselves, I mean on the pitch, I mean on the actual training sessions during games, of playing like they think they should do it, not overthinking, not being overcautious, which is something that we really do see, not in their first game, but when a young kid, an homegrown, comes in and he has one bad performances, the few games after, he's so cautious that he just racks up the bad performances, and we see this across the league. Those 3 roster spot might be the answer to that.
Well, and you combine those 3 extra spots with the USL affiliations or standalone teams, and what you have is no excuse anymore for these clubs not to sign these players to give them an opportunity. You simply sign them, and if you don't feel they're going to get the playing time in Major League Soccer, you still put them on the roster spot so you can use them in the secondary competition, so that you can use them if you have some injury problems, so you can get them training consistently with them, maybe spot them into games that are, if you have a big lead late or something or whatever, there's ways to get playing time in there at times. You just give them that opportunity. Even just being on the bench might help them learn, but then you still have that USL option, particularly when it's in your hometown or very close. In the case of Ottawa to Montreal, it's a very short little bump, or Swell Park and things like that. Well, Swell Park's part of Kansas City, but you know what I mean? Like standalones, they're a little different. It's an easy little commute to get there. So I think that just adds that double opportunity for these players, that they still get their playing time in USL, so they're still developing that way. There's no risk. We went back to Matt when he came in. They didn't have that option, right? So you had guys that sat there. I can think of a ton, like a handful of guys, TFC's academy, that, cynically speaking, they were signing to get the picture up in the paper and then forgetting about them, letting them rot. Well, now you have the opportunity to give them that, get that picture in the paper, which still gives you the benefit of that and that feel good about signing the local kid. But you also can play them in your USL team and continue to develop them and start them here and there in Major League Soccer. It's good for everyone all involved. Kevin.
Yeah, that's what I think so too as well. And going back to David Choignard and Jean-Yves Balou-Tabla, I do feel that for maybe the first time in training camp, at least this time around, that they have a shot to break that roster. Maybe not the starting 11 right away. That would be almost utopia. But before, when we talked about the arrivals of Ouimet, Lefebvre, so they're all during season. It's very rarely that we have them at the beginning of the season, training camp, and I think now they're in a position to succeed. They're put in a position where they have everything on their side. And I cannot say that was the case for a Carl Ouimet, for a Maxime Tissot. And we're just highlighting Montreal here. But the same damn example exists in every single team in MLS right now. So for Montreal, though, I do feel those 2 players, David Choignard and Balou-Tabla, are actually performing better at the training camp because they were put in a situation to do so.
All right. And look, you talk about getting opportunities and giving chances, and I sort of alluded to the fact that I think that the NCAA kids, the traditional historical way to get through. They've often just been given a longer rope to hang themselves with in some cases. And that sort of segues into another topic for today. And that is a player that came through that system and has sort of been around and been getting chance after chance after chance. And I'm not entirely sure has completely used it. It appears that he's not a terrible player, but it appears that Jack Mack is once again being shopped around to be sold off to another team in Major League Soccer. It comes to the point where you wonder how many opportunities does a guy like that get before you start to write off.
Yeah, it's funny though, because when you look at Jack Mack's body of work in Major League Soccer, he has spurt of glimpses of genius. When I say spurt, is few games, few months in a row. When he was with the Montreal Impact, when he was with Philadelphia Union before the trade to Montreal Impact. Actually, it's right before that Gold Cup. Go back to 2013. Spring of 2013, Jack Mack is leading scorer of the Major League Soccer, equal tied to Marco Di Vaio at 13 goals in the middle of June. Then he gets called up to the Gold Cup. Stays on the bench, doesn't play, loses confidence, come back with Philly. Nothing has been the same since. Goes to Montreal, had a little spurts of genius, some great run, great playing time, some CONCACAF Champions League success, and then nothing. And then he gets traded, and then nothing. And then he goes to another team, and then nothing. And now he's being shopped around. What am I saying is I did see some very high upsides in Jack McInerney. Consistency, professional lifestyle. He's a great person, great character. But is he doing everything at a level to become the extreme superstar that maybe he has a talent to do so? Those are all questions that everybody always asks when it's considered to Jack Mack. But I have seen him with my own eyes perform at a high level. I have seen what he can do with his foot and the ball. And I still don't know why he hasn't put the numbers that we all expected he would.
Is Jack Mack the Mario Balotelli of Major League Soccer?
Be careful, Mario Balotelli's contract is going to end soon, and he might be in Major League Soccer. But for Jack Mack, I don't know if I would go that way, because I think he's still more calm off pitch than Balotelli. But if you look at talent and like raw talent and what you do with that raw talent, I think sometimes work ethic overplays talent. I still feel Jack Mack has a whole lot of raw talent, and I just hope that he finds the right manager, the right coach, the right situation to get back to that goal-scoring ways of 2013.
Yeah, and he's certainly going to get more chances because, people see those flashes, as you say. It's not exactly the best analogy that I was using when I was talking about the homegrown stuff there too, because he clearly does have some underlying talent. The Balotelli, to be serious about it for a second, is closer, because that's a guy that, again, you look at and you go, wow, look at that talent, but there's just something missing there. Although he's doing pretty well this year, and hopefully he can continue that. And I would love to see Mario in Major League Soccer, but that would just be fun. I would enjoy that a great deal.
Like Balotelli in a team, like, I don't know, you need a team with attitude, like a Kansas City or something. Balotelli goes there, wreaks havoc in the whole league, and finish Golden Boot leader,
Mario Balotelli's middle America adventure. That would be something to see for sure. All right. A couple more quick ones here to get moving on this one, Kevin. Look, you wanted to mention the awards that what's the name here?
Mary Harvey.
Mary
Harvey was named the Werner Fricker Builder Award winner. It's the most prestigious award given by the United States Soccer Federation. Former national team goalkeeper Mary Harvey has been working in the soccer world at different levels, different communities, to help build soccer at a grassroots level and higher up after a career. This award is given to people that have 20 plus years of experience and service in the sports in the United States. And Mary Harvey, former women's national team goalkeeper in 91 and 96 and the Olympic gold medalist. She's a longtime advocate for the sport, and she has been named the 2017 winner of the United States Soccer Federation's most prestigious award, the Werner Fricker Builder Award.
It was the first female to win, which I think is a reflection of the fact that the female game's only really been going at a high level for about 20 years. So this is 25 years. So it's an opportunity that I think we'll see more women win this moving forward. The final topic on this when I'm leaving it to the end because I'm sick of talking about this in some way, but nonetheless, 442 is writing today that Major League Soccer is no longer as enamored, which is shocking, enamored with David Beckham and Miami, and they might be willing to finally pull the plug on that and move on because they have lots of good expansion bids that they could give one of those spots to, Kevin.
How long has it been since we've talked about the demise of Miami's project for MLS? It's been years now that I've said that this will never happen. I wasn't basing myself on just pure gut feeling. Just look at everything else. It was written on the wall. It was a publicity stunt, and that stunt failed. That stunt didn't result in what they all wanted, which was grassroots traction for a club in Miami. That press conference, that whole day with the fan, the colors, the scarves, the suits, the ties, the handkerchiefs, that day was made to build up hype, to build up excitement, to build up a fan base, a support, and that did not follow. So they have no choice to pull that plug and give that franchise to actual fan bases, cities that have been willing to put money where their mouth were in the last week.
Yeah, look, if you remember that press conference, and I watched it live, it was perhaps the most MLS thing I've ever seen in my life in terms of the negative side of Major League Soccer. It was, the Empire had no clothes. It was completely balder. It was ridiculous. It was completely a silly day that had nothing behind it. And it was transparent at the time too. Like, it wasn't like one of those things that our hindsight is telling us. I remember writing immediately after that this was just a load of crap that they just sold us because they were playing it up as if they were making an expansion announcement. And if you didn't listen carefully to the words and read between the lines, you might have walked away thinking that they had just announced Miami as an expansion team, but it was all contingent upon things happening and things that were nowhere close to happening. And they're still nowhere close to happening. And that's why it's probably time to move on. And that's got to be good news, I would think, to Tampa Bay, if in fact they do that. 2 teams in Florida is probably where they'll stop. So, that might be it for Miami. And that's not even necessarily a bad thing. I don't think Miami is the best market out there.
How many
it's a sexy market, but
how many sports franchises do you know that were successful in Miami? Do you even include the Marlins right now? I don't know if you consider them successful. Very rarely.
Really.
Exactly. Look at the amount of teams that went to Miami and folded outside of Miami FC and the NASL. And do you even consider that a success? That's another question. But if you're looking at over the years, the Fusion and the Mutiny, and they all went belly up. It never worked. And other professional franchise in Miami, the Heat are the only one that eventually success, and it took championships and stars for decades like a Duane Wade to gather that success. Miami is it's not the touristy part, it's we are who we are and we do what we want. It's not necessarily conducive to a huge sports fan base because sports is just one of the things that's going on. The city is always moving, the city is always buzzing 24 hours a day, it's always going on. And on South Beach, MLS is not going to be at the top of the conversation tomorrow morning. And that is one of the things needed for MLS to have a team there and be successful. And that is at least, my friends, 10 years down the road.
Yeah, look, the Heat are the only successful team. As you said, that has a large thing to do with the big 3 going there for a while, winning a couple championships. There's still some holdout of that. But the Heat, in terms of the weather, is ultimately the attraction that brings people to Miami more than the sports that they could play there. And it's also what keeps people out of the stadiums in the summer, because who wants to go stifle themselves in a stadium for 2 hours when you can sit on the beach, right?
When you can be on a patio on South Beach looking at Art Deco colors that reminds you that you think you're in Havana in the 60s, yeah, that's the type of night you can have in Miami. Never mind the 24-hour party. And you want to go in the stadium? Precisely. And you want to go in the stadium for 2 hours? Yeah, you have a lot of choices there, my friends.
Yeah, and the only way it would ever work is if they could make it sexy, which is why they were trying to attach Beckham to it. But no one goes to a game to watch an owner. Maybe you have him going around town to drum up interest, and that might help a little bit. But there's going to be a time when you're playing Columbus on a Wednesday night, right? And there ain't nothing sexy about that unless you're a hardcore soccer fan like ourselves. Just for a casual person that's part of the hip scene there, Columbus on a Wednesday night is not really going to do it for them. And that's that's maybe their loss, but nonetheless, you're fighting uphill on that one. So I think it's time to put that expansion bubble somewhere where people actually want it. If that's Tampa Bay, then great. If it's San Antonio, then great. If it's Charlotte, then great. Let's just get it somewhere where people actually want it, Kevin.
Exactly. And I still feel Tampa Bay will be one of those first two teams awarded a franchise in the next few months.
All right. On that note, my voice is getting better, but it is not yet perfect. We will take a break on a half hour. We're going to take a break. We're going to take a long break, a very long break. I wouldn't stick with it unless you really want to, because it might be up to 24 hours this break. But nonetheless, as always, I will have Kevin say goodbye.
Until tomorrow, stay tuned for our games of the week. We'll talk Premier League. We'll talk what's happening in the game this weekend. And until then, have a great soccer. You were listening to SPN, the Sports Podcasting Network. Visit us, sportspodcastingnetwork.com.